Today, we are going to address um, the major news event that happened this week. Charlie Kirk has been shot and killed while speaking to his audience at Utah. A few months ago, we covered a story about conservative books getting kicked out of public libraries. Last week, we covered a story about a conservative in the UK getting arrested for his tweets. And now we're talking about a podcaster, speaker, and author who has been killed for speaking about what he believes in. Um,
And
as
there's
Charlie
yeah,
Kirk, I'll give some biographic
but
details about him real quick, and then we'll start talking about it. um, Charlie Kirk is a prominent Christian conservative author, and he's the co-founder of Turning Point USA. He started it when he was 18 years old. Um, he's a young father. He has two children. Just got married recently. He's put out several books. Uh, he's known for being open and engaging with his audience, and just really allowing anything to be said so that he can engage with it, so it can be heard, and so that he could address it from his conservative Christian viewpoint. From a Christian perspective, he always gave people verses, he gave people Bible. He didn't back down from his beliefs, no matter how difficult that it became. And I just have nothing but respect for what he did, what he stood for, and most of the time, the way he went about it. Of course, you always have some differences that you have with a public figure in the way they address certain things, but it's hard to armchair general that because he's on the spot and you're not. You get to watch the replay. Um, Thomas,
I
what are
will
some things that
say,
he did as an author that really just expanded his ability to speak to his audience?
yeah, it's interesting. People are nitpicking every word he's ever said when so much of the recordings of him are him in a context where people can ask him any kind of question, and they're asking those questions antagonistically. And the fact that there's so little bad stuff is really remarkable. Uh, as somebody who does those kinds of things in a much safer environment, right, with patrons who are asking me book marketing questions, it's very difficult to take that kind of open Q&A, much less in a hostile environment like he did. And that's really remarkable. But you've heard a lot about Charlie Kirk. We've been talking about him as a country for 3 days, and uh, what I want to do just briefly is talk about him as an author. This is Author Update. And uh, there's so many remarkable things about him that it's easy to forget that he's actually an example of somebody doing just about everything right from a book marketing perspective and from an author perspective and from a writing perspective. And I think the most notable thing you could say about Charlie Kirk is that he listened to his Timothy.
His whole brand was built on going to his Timothy and talking to them on camera.
That's right. Like everyone's like he's a martyr for public speech and for First Amendment speech, and I don't think people realize quite what that is. Because normally, when somebody goes and gives a speech on a campus, they go and they give a speech, and they're holding the microphone the whole time, speaking the whole time. And that's not what Charlie Kirk did. He spent a huge amount of his time allowing his intellectual opponents to talk, and he would say, "It's your turn to talk, and we're going to go back and forth." And we're going and there this is kind of this ancient principle of by debating and discussing the truth can win,
Right.
the objective truth can be found. But it has a huge impact, that listening, because to be a good debater you must be a good listener. You can't win a debate if all you're doing is throwing isms at the other person and saying you're a bad person, if you don't
Right.
really learn to understand their arguments. And he really did. And that really informed his writings, right? He's 5 of the top 6 best-selling books on Amazon right now are all Charlie Kirk books. His books are all doing well, but they were doing well even before he was killed and before he became a national news story. And a big part of that was that he had a really clear message to those books, and he had a really clear audience. He knew who he was communicating to, and he spent a lot of time listening, because a lot of the clips of Charlie that I've seen are not him on a big stage. They're him on a little stage, just sitting behind a table, discussing back and forth with somebody who's inevitably being very mean at least in the clips that I'm seeing. And he's responding with grace and with kindness and with empathy and with warmth and with wisdom and with truth. And I think that is the work of an author. that's what make if you can do that well in real life, you'll be able to write well. Right? If your writing comes out of that conversation, and it's also an opportunity to practice. So I didn't follow Charlie Kirk very well early in his career, but I've listened to people who did, and they've talked about how much of an improvement as he grew in his skills, his debating skills, his communication skills, his organizational skills, his writing skills. And another thing I think kind of a lesson to take away is that he really put a lot of effort into building his platform. And so, he did all the things that I encourage authors to do, right? He had a podcast, he had an email newsletter, he did public speaking, he used social media really well, and very strategically. So he didn't waste time on social media, but he did things in real life that would create good content for social media. So a lot of the social media content was, clips of his speaking and whatnot, but he also would actually engage with people on social media. And it's interesting as his tweets are resurfacing. People are going through his tweets and kind of retweeting them from months ago. And a lot of them are very prescient, and a lot of them contain a lot of wisdom. And one of the things that he did, he wrote a book that's not coming out until December. But I've heard that this is a practice of his. And one I've been challenged, I'm like pondering if I'm going to do this, is that he actually practiced the Sabbath and he rested from his phone on Sundays. So this is a guy who traveled the country speaking. He was on cable news all the time. And on Sunday, you couldn't book him to speak and you couldn't get a hold of him because he would put his phone away and he was fully there with his family. And I'm not fully there on Sunday with my family. And so it's really challenging. And I think that is a good example of using social media well. He had courage, which is one of the things I've talked about a lot on the podcasts about being so critical for good book marketing. And he was willing to talk to people even who hated him and be around people who hated him. And I think that courage is really attractive. It's attractive to young people. It's attractive to everybody. And he understood the times. He knew the zeitgeist. In fact, he knew the zeitgeist often better than a lot of people who are observers of culture. People would make comments about young people saying young people are socialists. And he'd be like, no, they're not. And he would have authority to say that because he spent a lot of time listening to young people. And not to say that there aren't any socialists, but like he understood how to communicate and he understood what turning we're in. I don't think he would have articulated it in terms of Strauss and Howell's four turnings like we've been discussing zeitgeist, right. But he had, I think, an intuitive understanding of the zeitgeist. And I think one encouragement for authors is that writing is a way for your ideas to live on after you. So Charlie's not with us anymore, but his books are. His books are like I said, 5 of the 6 top best-selling books on Amazon. I wouldn't be surprised if on Tuesday when we get the New York Times bestseller list, he's occupying the top spots there as well. This is really sad. This was hard for me to process.
There's been a lot of impact on authors just in the past couple of days, based on the social media activity mostly that's been going on. Everyone feels like they have to start throwing out their position on it. It's already happening in the comments here.
I hope we're not throwing the negative ones up on screen.
Thank you. I know my job.
Okay.
Yeah, they can do it themselves. So Stephen King is probably the best example of what happened. He threw up something onto X that he had pulled out of context. He said Charlie Kirk had said the gays should be stoned. And turns out that quote was taken out of context. Charlie Kirk had actually been talking about how not to use the Bible, and that saying that gays should be stoned because the Bible says so is not the right way to use the Bible. Stephen King did wind up apologizing and taking it down. And then
I want to stop you real quick because this connects with going back to the Timothy. We'll go back to the Stephen King thing. part of listening well is understanding your opponent's position. And so often Charlie would quote, often very articulately, the opponent's position and then critique it, which is a debate technique to demonstrate I understand what you're saying and now I'm going to show how it's wrong. And it's not just this thing that Stephen King jumped on. A lot of things that supposedly he said, if you expand the timeline just slightly, you'll then hear him giving a very articulate critique of the thing that he supposedly said. And it's a very disingenuous way to engage, and long term, it doesn't work. Okay, so back to Stephen King.
Right. So the mistake Stephen King made was he had pulled a quote out of context that he had actually seen on X elsewhere, and he just amplified it, which is a big deal because he's a huge antenna for amplifying things. Um, and he wound up deleting it. He wound up uh, backtracking from it and apologizing, and everyone started dogpiling on him. Like Stephen King getting canceled is kind of a big deal. You kind of think you're beyond cancellation at a certain size. The thing I was looking at is, okay, so what do authors learn from this then? Uh, what can an author say and not say at a time of tension when the atmosphere is extremely charged, no matter what is happening? How should you govern the way that you speak and the way that you are viewed because of what you said? The dangers that are present to authors and their brands. I mean, Stephen King, he's kind of made his money, right? He's kind of had his success. Even if he gets canceled, he's going to be fine personally. The
Yeah,
rest of
he's
us
not
who are
canceled. He's not for
right.
any actual meaning of that word. He's not canceled, but he is receiving ire, and part of it is people are grieving, and the anger is looking for an outlet. And he's a prominent person to get the anger splashed on, and he has not been charitable in his language.
So, as an author who is trying to establish a brand, as someone, hey, come here and enjoy things, come here and learn things. And how should you speak? How should you govern yourself? So we have a free speech argument here versus a best practices argument here. Thomas, what are your thoughts on how an author should govern their speech?
You want to pick your battles. You want to be circumspect, and you want to be mindful of your brand. When emotions are high, being quiet is often a really good thing to do. One of the things I noticed when this first happened, uh, and people, there's lots of extreme emotions on X. Elon Musk took a break from X for half a day, completely went dark, which is very uncharacteristic for Musk,
For him.
particularly when there's big breaking news. And I think Musk was aware of his own emotions, and he was afraid of um, saying things that would cause society to spin out of control. Because there's a real sense that we're trying to have a chess match, and if the other person punches me on the face, can we still have a chess match? Like, is me learning how to play chess better going to do any good? And there's a sense on the left that if you say bad things, you deserve to get killed. And you can see it in the comments, this attitude of like, well, he was a bad person because he said bad things. And the implied conclusion is, therefore, he brought it on himself. And you'll even hear people on the left saying this explicitly. He brought this on himself because he said things I disagree with. And that is evil. And it's un-American. um, Evil is real. We're fighting against spiritual forces of evil, and those spiritual forces of evil influence people's ideas. And people can be rescued from those evil forces, and they can be rescued from those evil, toxic ideas, and they must be. They must be rescued because we all hear things that we don't like all the time. If that then justifies us to take violence or to act in a violent way, we can't be a people. We can't have a society. We can't be a nation.
George R. R. Martin says he's going to take another 10 years to write the last Game of Thrones book. I don't get to shoot him. Like that's not how that works.
But there's another side of this, and that is the fear, because it's very scary to be threatened. And my kids don't really understand what's going on, but my oldest is old enough to know that an author and a podcaster was shot, because she heard the adults in the room talking about it. And the night after the shooting, she woke up crying, and my wife went in to comfort her. And she wanted to know if they were going to kill Daddy next. Now, her opinion of me is very elevated. Right? Like,
As it should be.
so so part of it is flattering, but another part of it is like, well, we never thought they would go after people who had no power, right? Because it's not like Charlie Kirk was a government official. Sure, the people shot at the president a few times, and a guy with a gun went to the Supreme Court justice's house, and and the Speaker of the House was shot. Like, sure, the political people were shot, but they wouldn't speak. They wouldn't shoot a commentator. They wouldn't shoot somebody who just spoke words, and they did. And so, like, well, surely they wouldn't shoot a obscure commentator. And it's like,
It's actually easier.
yeah, Charlie Kirk has lots of security, and Ben Shapiro has lots of security. Elon Musk has lots of security, and it's very expensive. This is actually Alexander McCrease wrote a really great article on this about a somebody he worked with who was doing campus events, and Antifa started doing violence at the events, and he just shared the financial cost of how much their insurance went up. They suddenly had to start paying, I think, $400,000 just in insurance, and then they had to start paying $30,000 a month for security. And even then, the colleges would cancel the events because of the other side's violence. So it literally had a chilling effect on fear. And there's discussions like, am I safe going? A friend of mine, I was chatting with him, and his wife texted him, and she was concerned about going to the grocery store, right? And should she have to carry at a grocery store, and talking about how we're training our daughters to have situational awareness. And because this isn't the only violent thing that's happened this week. There's other terrible, awful things that have happened, which actually we were going to talk about as like the leading thing. And I remember when I was a kid, my dad is an accountant, and accountants occasionally come across organized crime. It's, in fact, like half the people who work at the FBI are actually accountants. Like, that's, and something had happened, and he was scared. So he came home, and he like called my mom and told her to lock the doors. And like for 24 hours, there was fear in the house. And I remember watching him decide not to be afraid. And I don't know what happened. I don't know what the details were. If somebody got arrested. And I was just a kid. He didn't share that with me. It's not my business. But then he wasn't afraid. And it was a conscious choice. And he wasn't going to allow whatever happened with organized crime to control his life and to keep him from doing his job. And he's still doing his job, and he's lived the rest. He's in the process of retiring now, much to the chagrin of many authors who are contacting me looking for an accountant who will work with him. And I'm really encouraged by that example. And we need people to pick up Charlie's microphone. We need people who will be courageous. And some of those people are going to suffer. They're going to suffer financially. Their families will fear, and some of their families may mourn.
There is a concept among combat troops that the guy next to you is going to get hit. and that's kind of worse than getting hit yourself. Um, you got survivor's guilt. You have there's a lot of things that are involved with being a fighting man that living is almost worse. And you'll see that a lot among veterans is that I wish I'd gone out with my boy. Uh, there's some misunderstanding right now. Garan Cash Patel, he said something like, see you in Valhalla. Everyone say, what are you saying? That you're Indian, he was Christian. Guys, it's something military, and because most military goes into law enforcement when they're done, law enforcement, uh, you know, I'll see you in Valhalla. It's what warriors say to each other when another warrior has died. And so don't get caught around the spokes on that one. Uh, when one of your own falls, you pick up his weapon, take his tags, and you keep going. The mission still has to be accomplished because otherwise, what did he die for? Like what are we even doing here? And this is something that civilians, particularly in America, struggle with because they don't really have the experience of losing somebody that they were doing something with. It doesn't happen a whole lot to Americans, thank God. But I've been watching on social media, everybody being enraged and everything, and moral outrage is an appropriate response to murder. Doesn't matter who it happens to. Moral outrage should occur. Uh, the issue after that then is how do the survivors react to the fall of the person who galvanized us or encouraged us or inspired us or whatever. How do you react to that? Well, there's the anger. Moral outrage is appropriate, but then what do you do with that anger? Okay. You don't get to go gun down a whole village in Vietnam because they killed one of your boys. Okay. You don't get to do that. You have to know who to go after. And that requires intelligence, which was my actual job in the Marine Corps, was knowing who to go after. You don't just get to shoot all the people wearing keffiyehs. That's not how it works. Just because they say Allahu Akbar doesn't mean they're a terrorist. Uh, it's keeping yourself disciplined is really what it is.
We
When
need Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go.
We need the strong men who will make good times. Charlie Kirk was that kind of man. Right? We talk about the zeitgeist, right? We're in the season where we're recovering from the bad times that the weak men made. Right? Allowing the society to get to this point where women are not safe on trains, where speakers are not safe to speak on college campuses. And those strong men have to do difficult things. And one of those difficult things is being meek, controlling that strength and that
Yes.
violence. Exactly like what you're saying, Jonathan, right? So, justice. I love the statue of justice, right? It's this woman who's blind. She's wearing a blindfold. She's blind to color and class, but she's bearing a naked blade. It is not in its sheath. It is a naked blade. When you see Lady Justice, in one hand, she is holding the naked blade, and in the other hand, she is holding scales, because the standard of justice, the ancient standard of justice, is an eye for an eye and a life for a life. And that is actually a balanced standard, because the temptation is you waffle back and forth to be harsher than that, where you take my eye, so I'm going to kill you, or to be lighter than that, where you take my eye and no bad people are ever punished and evil is just allowed to happen and victims are the only ones who suffer. The innocent are the only ones who suffer. And that is what the weak men have created in our society. They're unwilling to punish evil. They're unwilling to allow Lady Justice to wield the naked blade. And the time for that is coming to an end. And that means that we follow the ancient paths. Our ancestors gave us the system. We don't have to invent something new. We just follow what our ancestors gave us: fair trials, jury of your peers, swift executions and punishments. That's all we need to fix the society. Fair trials, but with justice at the end. So resist your soul's temptation to take justice into your own hands.
Correct. Legitimacy is a major part of the way punishment works. If you look at the Bible, you know, Cain kills Abel, the first murder. And Cain's legitimate concern was everyone's going to want to kill me now. So God puts a special mark on him so that it won't happen. Then you have the law of self defense given later on when Lamech is talking to his wives and saying a young man went after him and he had to take him out. Then after that, after the flood occurred, which was a couple thousand years later, after the flood occurred is when God gave the specific command that whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed. And that is the passing on of the torch of punishment to government, to legitimacy. And governments have their own judgment later on. They will answer for this, for whatever it is that they have done, but it passes from the individual when we're talking about punishment. Now, self defense is different. Self defense hasn't changed. But in terms of going and looking for someone to bring them to justice, that is a governmental, it's a clear governmental thing.
That's
He
right.
holds the sword for a reason.
Yeah. And it is right and good for a Christian to forgive the evildoer, right? So for the wife or the husband of the person who's been injured, to forgive the murderer. And it is also right and good for the judge to say, you are guilty, and you will, tomorrow at noon, you'll be hanged by the neck until dead. Right? Like those things are not in conflict. And really harboring unforgiveness is poisonous, right? Like
Right.
it's really good to forgive as individuals, right? Jesus's instructions on this are to be followed. But uh, him calling us to forgive in as individuals to turn the other cheek does not mean that murderers just get to go around murdering and suffer no consequences. That has never been what that means. We have forgotten what justice is. We've been putting words in front of the word justice for so long. We've forgotten what justice is.
Right.
and our ancestors gave us the picture. It's a woman with a blindfold, blind to class and color, bearing a naked blade with scales, so that the scales are brought back to balance. That is justice. And we can have that again. All right. It's been lost many times, it's been regained many times. The wheel turns ever onward. We're in a fourth turning right now, which is when it tends to fall apart and when it tends to be, or when it tends to have fallen apart and when it starts to be rebuilt. And you can advocate for that in your stories, and you can help people appreciate justice through your fiction. You can advocate for it in your nonfiction, and I think it's really important to do this. And
So learn from Charlie Kirk's example. Look at his ministry, look how he did what he did, how he engaged with the people that he did, and then look at his impact, look at his legacy that has been left after. His mission was to do a certain thing. His mission was to conserve American values and to promote the gospel of Jesus Christ. And you can see in the wake of his death how that has continued. I see videos all the time of people saying, I thought this way, and then they killed him, and I didn't think we were capable of that. And now I'm taking a real hard look at everything else, which is exactly what Charlie wanted to have done in the first place.
And I think a lot of people's eyes are being opened as they're seeing friends of theirs celebrating this death. And they're like, gosh, if you can celebrate the murder of a man in front of his family, I no longer see you as a moral authority. And if you're not a moral authority on this, perhaps you're not a moral authority on all of the other things. And I think
Yeah.
all of society is having a reorientation of as people are showing their true colors.
So I was in hard contact with psychopaths/sociopaths for a good chunk of my Marine Corps career. Okay. It's trained, it's indoctrinated. Okay. Humans don't start out this way, except for very small numbers. And a lot of that has to do with staying on social media permanently. Okay. If you become a dopamine addict and it's a false dopamine, and that's all you go for is the likes and the views and the comments, and all publicity is good publicity, so hate comments are good. You get stuck into that and you become really unhealthy and you actually become a psychopath, to where you don't feel emotions normally like a regular human being does. So a lot of what is being seen right now on social media is actually what Charlie was trying to fight against the whole time. He was like, go out, touch grass, get married, have kids, have a family, be happy,
Go to
you know,
church.
go to church, read your Bible, love the Lord, love each other, do the things that are healthy for human beings, because what's happening right now is terrible and horrible and awful. And we can't live in a psychotic culture. So a lot of what people are seeing and are getting angry at, which moral outrage again is appropriate, but understand again how damaged a lot of people are, how they have been damaged by whatever culture or whatever lens they've been forced to perceive the world through. I mean, like I said, I spent a lot of my career going up against fundamentalist Islam. And the problem is that they get one lens coming in, and that's all they get to feed off of, and it forms everything about them. The same thing is happening in the US, whether it's on left or right. You should be informed by both sides so you can strike the balance that is appropriate for the time that you are in. Uh and
Not to say that there's a moral equivalence, but to say
there's
that,
not. I'm not saying that.
yeah, but
Not saying
listening
that.
to the other side is so important. And Charlie did that so much. I don't think anybody did that more than Charlie. That was his whole brand, was listening. And his argument was, once we stop listening, that's when we start fighting. That's when the
Shooting.
violence starts. And I actually remember having that exact same conversation with a Democrat poll worker like 20 years ago. We were both working a political campaign on different sides for different candidates who were running against each other. And we're both handing out flyers to people as they were coming in to vote just outside of the area where you can't do that anymore. And we were chatting and having a debate on the issues. And I remember making the comment to him that it was so much better to talk than to be on opposite sides of the sidewalk shooting at each other.
Mm,
And at the time, that was a joke. We both laughed at that because we're like, obviously, we wouldn't be shooting at each other. And that's not as obvious anymore. And that's really sad. So, what do we do now as a society? I guess before we move on to the next topic. And I think this is an important conversation for authors
yeah.
because y'all are shaping the ideas that society is
Right.
going to use. You're giving the narratives that society is going to make sense of all of this. I was in a meeting of some dads last night. We were talking about like training our daughters, to protect themselves. And one of the dads was talking about his daughter starting to carry and giving her training so she could do that, but also to have this guardian mindset. And I remember making the comment, I was like, we need to do this, but we shouldn't normalize it. We need to make society such that we don't have to train our granddaughters how to carry and to have that guardian mindset. Like, this is not natural. This is
Right.
unhealthy. This can't stay this way. Things have got to change. Women should be able to sit on a bus without fear of the person sitting behind them, which means that justice needs to wield the naked blade. But it also means, more importantly, that we as a society need to repent of our evil sins. Because, yes, other people have sinned and other people have done terrible things to us, and they need to face justice for those things. But we have also sinned. We have broken the law. We have lied. We have stolen. We have coveted. We've taken God's name in vain. And we need to repent of those sins. And we need to pray. And we need to put our trust in Jesus. And we need to go back to church. No more of this, oh, I'll just watch it on TV. The pandemic is over. We got to get back to church. If you want to honor Charlie Kirk's legacy, go back to church. There's one in your area. They'd be happy to have you. I guarantee it. So that's the first thing. We need to get right. We need to get our souls right, because we can't help somebody else pull the plank out of their eye until, or sorry, pull the speck out of their eye until we pull the plank out of our own eye. And that spiritual work has got to happen. And we need to normalize religion in the public sphere again. Because the spiritual world is real. And I think a lot of people are realizing that. A lot of people are realizing that demons are real. That an seemingly normal boy can suddenly transform into a monster. And it's like, that's weird. That is like, his eyes are different and his face is different, and this normal boy is now a monster, or there's a monster inside of him. That is weird. And once your eyes are open to evil, which is unfortunate, it also allows your eyes to be open to good. And you start to understand the unseen world a little bit. And again, the wisdom of our ancestors, right? They had religion for a purpose. They had church for a purpose. There's a spiritual reality that happens when we gather together that affects the physical world. So, number one, repent, trust in Jesus, pray for our nation. Number two, reject calls for vigilante violence and civil war.
I'll
I
take
don't.
this one.
Go
I
ahead.
lived in a country that had civil war. You do not want that. There's a lot of people on social media right now who are almost gleeful that their time has come.
What?
And yeah,
Some of them are real, though. Some of it is real.
No. Let me address that. Okay. First of all, if something is trying to make you angry, look and see why it's trying to make you angry. Controlling people through their anger is the easiest way to control people, especially if those people think they're being moral. It's a very easy way to make people do things. This has been covered for 50 years now. The CIA used it all the time in the 80s. We've known about this for a while. If it's happening to you on social media and something's making you angry, look at it and see, okay, why are you trying to make me angry? Okay. So that's the bot side of things. That's someone just trying to make you mad because there's tons of foreign actors that very greatly value destabilizing the US. And now's a great time to do it. Now, the actual people who are excited for the concept of civil war, they have no idea what they're talking about. You have no idea what you're talking about.
It doesn't fix the problem.
Well, it doesn't fix the problem. It creates a ruin. But also, you've never lived your life having to look around at trash and wonder if it's a bomb. You do not know what you are asking for. So I would say reject this kind of world you think would be fun.
We have like 10 times the population, or 20 times the population now than we had during the American Civil War, the first one. And we have still never had a war with as many casualties as that war that we had when we only had like 30 states, or and our biggest city had like 2 million people in it. Like, it is a unfathomably terrible option and completely unnecessary, because our ancestors already gave us the solution, which is true justice, like through the courts. Yeah, it's just so terrible.
So
Go ahead.
we've covered pretty much the majority of what we need to cover regarding Charlie Kirk. People are going to make their own decisions. I was inspired and shamed by his impact and the impact I have not had. I have not worked as hard as he did. The man was a workaholic. They said he was friendly to everyone, extroverted, always talking to everyone. He sent personal messages all the time to anyone who needed it, not people that could benefit him, anyone who needed it. And like I said, I am inspired and shamed. Inspired by his life, inspired by his example, and shamed by what I have not even aspired to do. I wouldn't stay in my office and not talk to anybody and write my little books at, the rate of one every 3 years. And then,
Meanwhile, he's podcasting every day,
yeah,
still writing a book every
yeah, like,
year,
come on,
and
come on.
traveling and speaking at all of these.
The man wears a bulletproof vest in his day job. Like, that's as a Marine, that's something that's inspiring to me, the level of danger and threat he puts himself under. So take a look at your own ministry, take a look at your own mission, and adjust fire if you need to. Just push on. Don't despair. You know, quote Lord of the Rings to yourself if you have to. I wish this time hadn't come. So does everyone that has to live through those times. Instead, be like Theoden, who said, "Now I shall not be ashamed to stand in my ancestors' mighty company." And that's kind of what we're going for.